Welcome to this Ask the Entrepreneur. We have a pile of people online. It's recorded, and here we all are as well. I'll introduce Richard in a second. My name is Jeff Skinner, so many of you know I'm here running the Entrepreneurship Institute at the school. We thought we'd do this thing. Has anybody ever been to a recording of the Now Show out of the BBC? They ask, what was ... the worst thing and the best thing or something, and they get read out at the end. So we thought we'd do that. And if you've got this and you feel moved to tell us what your worst ever deal was, and then when you've done that, pass them down to James here at the front, and James will pass me his favourite selection, and we'll read some of them out at the very end. So this is about deal making, and Richard and I are going to talk about negotiation, especially negotiation as a startup. And I just have three observations before we start, because I do. The first one is it's around being the entrepreneur. Today is, that sense of all I have is me and my idea on a desert island. That's how it all starts. And so you're starting off from this position of being just lonely, really. And from that, you somehow have to build up this value chain. All the people who you have to coordinate with up and down the value chain, suppliers, end users, customers, and all the rest of them. You haven't had to assemble this little lot in the hope that you can provide something of value to them all. Otherwise, why would they deal with it? So that's my second observation. My third observation is this. It was said by a guy called Cheney Tang, who's an entrepreneur here, one of our first founders in the incubator many years ago. And he said, you have a successful business when people love your product, people spread your product, in other words, talk about it, and finally, people pay for your product. And I want to make a special emphasis on that because it's easy to give stuff away at the beginning. And that doesn't actually prove you can do deals or people, you've got a business. It just means people liked your free stuff. So that is my sort of starting point. And Richard, why don't you say just a few words about yourself before we kick off?
Sure. Hi, Jeff. Thank you very much. And I'm delighted to be here on behalf of the Company of Entrepreneurs and my startup, Savage Macbeth. So my background is marketing, brand, worked in corporate for 15 years or so. I then got totally seduced by this internet lark that turned up, which everyone seemed to think was going to catch on. And I joined a startup then. That was my first sort of foray into entrepreneurship, apart from a modest startup when I was 17. And from then on, the first big bubble burst. Sadly, we were right in the heart of it in the early 2000s, but learnt a lot about entrepreneurship. Went on to set up a retail insights auditing and research business, which I ran for 17 or 18 years or so, and then got involved in negotiation and got invited to go and start teaching negotiation for a big corporate. Did that for a few years, worked with some of the biggest brands in the world, and also some entrepreneurs, and felt inspired beginning of last year to set up another business and start our negotiation consultancy. We train, coach and consult in the dark arts of helping people do better deals and importantly strengthen relationships.
Right. And so the obvious question is, where do people go wrong? I mean, I'm talking here about the entrepreneur.
Sure.
The person who's starting off on that desert island.
That poor soul.
That poor soul who thinks they've got something. What are the most obvious mistakes you think they make?
Well, I mean, who wouldn't want to be on that desert island right now? Would be the first observation I'd make about that. But I think entrepreneurs start with a great idea, and I think if I was to generalize, tend to spend and put a lot of effort into try very hard to be different. And they invest a lot of time and effort being unique. And the danger of that is that you're very isolated, like this chap on this desert island, when you're unique. Because in order to sell something, you've got to generate budget or interest. And typically that means that you've got to change people's behaviors. Those customers have got to stop spending money somewhere else in favor of your budget. And
so does that mean you've got to be the same?
No, I don't. I think you've got to be better. I think you can be original. I think you can find different ways to do things. You can innovate your product or service. You can, behave differently.
Right. So being too original is a bad thing. If you're just coming at somebody up and down that supply chain with something completely different.
Sure.
So why does that go wrong?
Well, because of this necessity to change people's behavior. And it's easier to change someone's existing behavior in favor of you versus another brand or a service than it is to get them to fundamentally change their behavior, because you've got to dislodge something.
Right. So this, we often get entrepreneurs who come and pitch and say, we are completely different. There's nothing like us. I mean, they all say that, don't they? We have no competition. And what you're saying is that very often that can be a bad thing rather than a good thing. If that's the mindset with which they go out to, let's say, a channel to market, a B2B.
I think there's a lot of risk associated with it. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So what is the mindset that, I mean, you teach this professionally.
Yeah.
What is the mindset that you're giving to people as they go into a negotiation? Because they're all very bullish. So they think, I mean, all the entrepreneurs I speak think they have a compelling value proposition or they have a compelling product. So they're, hey, I'm ready to go. I'm excited. That's presumably not what you teach.
Well, enthusiasm is a fantastic thing. I mean, it is a human sort of trait, and you are engaging with other humans, so that if you can communicate your enthusiasm for what you're doing,
right,
that's an infectious thing.
Okay, so it's a good thing.
It's a good thing.
Necessary, but not.
It's a fantastic thing, but it has to have. It has to be supported with those features, if you like.
Right.
And it's the things that perhaps might make your product different to your competitors that allow you to differentiate yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a bad thing. But I think what happens is that we often lose sight of the benefits of those differences. And so we get caught up in the detail, the weeds, if you like, the things that we're so proud of that we've achieved in making our product different,
mm-hmm.
that we perhaps lose sight of the benefits of those differences.
Right. And the benefits in the eyes of, presumably, the people who we're talking to, which might be different depending who we're talking to.
The people that we're trying to change the behavior of, that we're trying to attract
Okay, so what do you have to do then to prepare for I mean, you're thinking, right, I'm going to go out and I've got to get something. One thing is, I can't give this away for free.
Yeah.
Because that's a crap deal.
Sure.
Unless there's something really compelling in return in terms of use case. So, what do you do, or what do you advise people to do if they're going to prepare for any type of negotiation?
Well, the first thing is to prepare.
Okay. Right.
So is to plan. I mean, I think there are a lot of people that are so excited about their new product, their service, what they've invested, their baby, if you like.
And an elevator pitch.
And that elevator pitch, that sort of, thing where they go, well, these people would be idiots if they didn't, buy into this, because you have to remember that the other side might not share the same level of excitement as you do. And so they go charging into these meetings, and the main person that they should have thought about in their planning is the person on the other side of the table. And it's a terribly self-centered and selfish kind of approach. So the first mistake people is that they don't plan at all anyway.
Right.
They go charging in because they're so wedded to their idea, so excited, rightly so. But they've forgotten about the other side and the benefits perhaps that they might enjoy as a result of. The other thing they do is that they've only thought that perhaps they've done that, but then they're projecting that. They're sort of machine gun fire. This is brilliant. This is fantastic. You've got to buy this. This is the effort I've gone into it. This is why it's so much better than all the competition. Ta-da. And sometimes they haven't addressed the issues of the other side. They haven't asked a single question.
Right. But it's difficult, or is it not, to think about the other side without knowing about them?
Sure.
Right. So what is this planning then that allows you to, I mean, are you thinking up all the reasons very gloomily why they wouldn't want to deal with you? Is that the kind of thing? Thinking of, if you like, not, I don't like the word objections, but nevertheless thinking of the why should they?
Of
Rather
course.
than why shouldn't they?
And a lot of the exercise is to kind of obviously think about the benefits to the other side, but think about what barriers they may face that might stop them from buying your product or service. So, I mean, we've got 3 tenets, if you like, in terms of how you approach this.
Go on.
The first one, which I've sort of said that we probably do too much of, is what we call objectivity, right? It's about thinking about what we want. What do we want to achieve? And I would caution anybody here of not the strategy by which we will achieve it, but it is the kind of what do we want to get out of this? And not just selling your product, but getting engagement with your product or service. And thinking about what goals that you're hoping to achieve from whatever opportunity you've got from meeting up with the person on the other side of the table. The second thing that I've just alluded to, which I think we are as human beings are terribly poor at, and think anyone that's ever been told by a partner or a friend, you don't listen to me, is empathy. Thinking about how are the benefits of my product or service going to help the people on the other side of the table? Are they going to save them money? Is it going to enhance their product? Is it going to address their sustainability ambitions? Is it going to align to their strategic objectives? Is it going to just make them happier? But thinking really hard about that. Now, we don't know the answers to all those questions. So coming back to your question, Jeff, is that thinking about the questions that you want to ask the other side, or rather the information that you need, and therefore the questions that you need to ask, is something that we often don't do. And I'm not talking about superficial questions. I'm going, in order to give them the best response, what do I need to know from the other side? Mm-hmm. And those can be planned and prepared. And the greatest negotiators, without a shadow of doubt, are great inquisitors. And then the other problem with that.
So actually the entrepreneurial enthusiasm in some ways can be a disadvantage because you're not going in with that objectivity. And actually you haven't dealt with these individuals before, so you're not quite sure who they are and what they're thinking. Sure. You don't understand their model.
Absolutely. And that I mean, that conversation, simply asking them questions, you will find that people are if you're specific about what you ask them, there's a good chance they will answer those questions. You've got to think about why you're there in the first place.
So, I mean, there's a third creativity written down in the list as well. We'll come to that.
We'll come on to that.
Yeah, come on to that, I think. Yeah. I mean, let's go then back to the entrepreneur, because the entrepreneur's from that position of weakness. The desert island's gone now. But it's really, you could easily get into the frame of mind where you're thinking, I desperately need this deal. Yeah. And it comes back to the, I need to get paid for something. I need something in return. But the sense that, what have I got? Yeah. Now, I'm nothing. I've got this company which I actually need. I'm weak. They're strong. And that's actually a fact of life. Sure. Or is it? So if you're going into this with this new thing, and you are at a disadvantage, because what have you got to offer them other than your coconut? Well, I mean, and then you give it to them and you haven't got a coconut left and you haven't got any more money to, and the metaphor runs out.
Well, I think it's quite hard to give stuff away for nothing, actually.
What you think it is because it jars in you, or
well, because I think because what you're doing is reducing the value in it. Inherently, if it's cheap enough to give away, right, then its value is diminished. All right, inherently. But I think what we do is we do what you've just done, actually, is we negotiate with ourselves.
Oh, we know, okay.
And I think we go, we're a tiny thing. They've barely heard of us. I've begged, borrowed, and stolen my way into this meeting. Okay. So what am I to them? Right? I'm in a position of weakness. So I'm already discounting. I'm already thinking, what can I do for them in order to get this opportunity?
Well, you kind of negotiated with yourself already, haven't you?
Well, exactly.
Your own aspirations.
Exactly. Really dangerous. And the poor souls on the other side of the table are blissfully unaware of this. So they suddenly get this blathering kind of mess of enthusiasm and excitement, and then they're giving it away for nothing. And they're sort of going, well, I'm wondering whether they value their product or their service.
Mm-hmm. But you do want them to love what you have. And somehow if they'll, I'm not going to say at any price.
Sure. But
So,
I think if in the objectivity step, okay, the planning, if you like, for that engagement, you've thought about what you're trying to achieve from that engagement. I would like you to trial my product. I would like you to give us an opportunity to talk to some of your customers, or to meet your customers, or to take stock of it. And we've got some ideas about how we could facilitate that. Being very specific to them, preparing what we would call a statement of intent at the start of that engagement, of saying, this is what we are hoping to achieve from this. You stand yourself a much better chance of, well, you certainly are then able to judge whether that was successful or not. You can also gauge whether or not they're going to abuse your position as a weaker party, or respect it and give you a chance.
I mean, when we were talking earlier, you said the very fact that they have agreed to a meeting with you can signal that they actually want to buy it.
I've sat in front of a business where I've begged, borrowed and stole myself to get in front of them. I've put my proposition on the table. This is as a startup, okay? And I've been told by the other side, a somewhat pompous chap, who said to me, Richard, the problem with you is, your product, is I can get the same product for less money, probably better quality, quicker than you can offer it to me. What do you do at that point? My view is that you ask yourself the question, well, why have you afforded yourself an hour of your time, organised a meeting with me, indulged in my proposition? The chances are I have more power, technically speaking, than I'd anticipated, because they're entertaining.
Okay, so you say you've got more power. I mean, they have, diminished your expectations in that. So I suppose I'm trying to get how do you? Is it a frame of mind thing that you think you're weak, but actually the very fact that you've got a meeting means that you've got. I mean,
the very fact that they're indulging in your product or service or idea gives you the start point, at least, of potentially a relationship. If you look at the power balance, okay, between two parties, and I appreciate as you're starting up, you've got this idea, you've invested this time, you can see a finish line over there. Wouldn't it be amazing if we could convert this business, if we could get that trial so we can use that to promote ourselves to the next potential customer? But what happens is that you think, I'm in such a weak position, but perhaps you're not. Perhaps you should put the benefits down and then say, will you buy it?
And it's almost, I would like to walk out of this meeting. That's the response that I should be making when they tell me that. I should be walking out of the meeting, but probably that's not what they want at this point, because they've entertained, they've invested in the meeting.
Sure. But I'd be stating to them, this is my objective from this engagement, right? This is the opportunity that I'm looking for. Right. Can you help me?
So can you help me? Well, that's an interesting one. All right. Does this mean then that you are looking for, always looking for, I mean, again, when we were preparing for this, you put great store by this word, building the relationship.
Yeah.
Which doesn't sound very businessy, or perhaps it does, but you're completely focused on the product and the value proposition, and the you are going to make something out of this. It seems obvious to me. Why doesn't it seem obvious to you? Instrumental.
Yeah.
And yet you just we spoke before, and you
Sure.
mentioned it today. It's more about the relationship. So if it's more about the relationship, how I mean, what are you doing to build that? Is it a series of smaller steps or what?
Well, A lot of people talk about negotiation as the only way of doing a deal. And the reality is negotiation is a trading process. It's an exchange of value. And if you're buying something incredibly commoditized, then there is really only one variable at play, and that is the price that you're going to pay for it. But the reality is that in a negotiation, there are a number of variables, and this is part of the planning process. What can you trade? Can you use time? Can you use trials? Can you use volume? Can you use some price elasticity based on commitment? Can you use testimonials or authority or various other attributes that you can bring into play and create a relationship between them so that you can address their needs? Their needs isn't usually necessarily getting the cheapest price. It might be breadth of distribution. It might be role of brand. There's a whole raft of things that can be brought to.
Or it might even be wanting to show that they're an innovative company bringing out new stuff.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah,
and supporting smaller businesses as well.
Right.
I mean, if you look at brand owners trying to sell into mainstream multiple grocery. Mainstream multiple grocery is very interested at looking at smaller producers, local producers, sustainable producers, ones that address their strategic objectives. And so that's when you start to think about how you can align your proposition to their proposition.
Okay.
Then you get more interest.
Right. And so do you then somehow have to they don't immediately see the value of what you might be bringing. So you don't sell on, I mean, you can state what you want out of the relationship finally.
Sure.
But then it's more of a series of small steps towards that as you gradually build up that relationship. I mean, do you get what you want out of a single meeting? I mean, is the deal actually progressed over a number of meetings?
I think typically there are a number of engagements, and it's very important. And I would advise any startup to kind of not try and do the deal in the first meeting, because it's worth reflecting on what's been put on the table and what terms you're being offered for that. The reason why the relationship thing is important is because that, if you like, is the foundation for the trading and the terms on it. I think it's a big assumption to make that you haven't addressed their needs. I think a lot of big players, a bit like a cat and a mouse, will say to a startup, well, it doesn't quite address our needs. They'll use these kind of tactics as leverage to squeeze you a bit harder. And whether that squeezing a bit harder is to get you to accept their terms or their price or arrangement for the deal, they'll be doing that. But people say to us, procurement, they're a nightmare. They always come after us for price, right? They're always going for lower prices. Price is not the most important thing in 80 or 90% of procurement's objectives. It just isn't. Risk is. Risk and reputation are higher than price, more often than not for procurement people. The reason why they come after you for price is because they get success, because you negotiate with yourself and you think, I'm going to get thrown out if I don't accept this 15% reduction, and therefore I'm going to capitulate. And they capitulate. They don't say thank you because you haven't traded that concession for anything else. And then they come after you for something else, and they keep going and they keep going. And you'll lose 70 or 80% of the value in your deals in the last 10%. What we call the Columbo effect. You're far too young to know this, but there's just one more thing they say. And you go, okay, because all you can see is the finish line. And you get dazzled by it.
Are there signals that you should look out for which sort of indicate that you should actually walk out?
Yeah.
I mean, we talk, there must be signals that say, okay, let's do something that's going to result in the next stage of the relationship. Yeah. Where presumably, I mean, what are the three things you want out of them? Money, commitment, endorsement, and their time. If you can get one of those three things on the first meeting, and then you go on and you're both a little bit more confident, you know each other, the relationships develop.
Yeah.
What are the signals that you just should walk away if you haven't got it? And should you be trying to kill that as quickly as possible, because it just takes up time and wastes everybody's time, or calls their bluff maybe?
So we have a structure. I mean, there is a structure. It's a sort of proven theory, what we call the conflict playing field. And in any position, there is the pitch point, i.e. your ideal situation, ideal but realistic, one that you can justify. And you've got a walk away position. And I think this is a real sort of lesson for younger entrepreneurs or startups, is know the walk away point, the point at which you just go, I can't accept that. It gives you confidence knowing what that position is. Now, the other side is going to have a pitch point and a walk away position as well. Okay. And the critical thing in the first exchange, at least, is to work out whether or not there's an overlap. If there's an overlap, then the deal will get done somewhere between your walk away position and their walk away position. Okay. So I would be trying to establish that and find out whether there is a deal to be done. And one thing we never ask people that we're selling to, or very rarely, is, do you want to do a deal with me? Interesting. Are you interested in this product? Does this resolve any issues for you or satisfy some needs that you may or may not have? Okay.
That's quite a powerful question, because it goes into one of these principles of persuasion or influence, which is consistency. If after that question, they're going to look pretty silly if they say, well, no, because they've agreed to a meeting with you. Well, whereas if they say yes, then that's kind of, right, I've said yes, there is something, so I'm going to look pretty silly if towards the end of this meeting I can't come to anything, or just walk away.
Sure. And what they'll be reluctant to say is yes, because they will feel that is a weakness. So what you'll do is you'll get some sort of answer in between. Well, only if you can halve the price of your product, or only if you can address our issues. And then you can start to explore those.
Right, and this is where the creativity part that does come out.
But the other part of the answer to your question, Jeff, about, are there any signs or signals? If people are badly behaved, if they're nasty or unkind, I now, and maybe this is just that I'm older and I care less about this sort of thing, I don't want to work with people that are nasty and do nasty deals. And if I were you, I would run away from those sorts of people, because they're the bullies, right? They're the ones that they'll bleed you dry, and you'll accept something that will be detrimental to your future growth. So recognize where your walkaway points are.
Okay, so especially as an entrepreneur, where it is the relationship, if you feel that this person, I couldn't have there's no chemistry, there's no loving of my product, if you like, in return, they don't get me, they don't get it, and actually I don't like you. Then you're best to walk away, because if it doesn't go wrong now, it'll go wrong later.
I think so, but in the context that negotiating these sorts of deals isn't about holding hands and skipping through the daisies together. It's they've got to do a good commercial deal, and you've got to do a good commercial deal.
Do you think that corporates, and we really are talking here about B2B, all right, rather than C's at the end, the B2Bs, the people you need up and down that value chain.
Sure.
Do you think that they are, generally they want to help the entrepreneur in their path? And do you think that actually the weakness that they clearly have on their desert island actually in some ways turn it round? Because you're not actually asking for advice, but in some way, you've got an entrepreneur's advantage, because you demonstrably are so weak and impecunious. Or do they take advantage of that, or do they empathize with it and think, I want to grow this, I want to help you?
I think many will take advantage of it, but the way to circumvent that, or to test whether or not there is some positivity or potential in that relationship, is often to ask for help, is to come back to that. Can you help me launch this product? Can you help us? It's a very flattering thing to do. If you ever want to get a job in a new company, much better to say, hi, really interested in what you're doing. I'd love some advice on my CV. Can I come and talk to you about what opportunities there might be with you, or indeed how I might take this elsewhere. People are more likely to help than kind of, can I have that job?
Yeah, so it's a bit disarming as well. And I suppose it's also, it helps you to get what's really, one of the big things I've taken just from our discussion here is to lay out confidently what you would like out of this meeting.
Yeah.
It's business.
Yeah.
This is what I need. This is why I'm investing my time. These are my hopes. This is what I need from you.
Yeah.
So is there any way in which you can help me get there?
Sure. Absolutely. And if in doubt, you can always rely on the ultimate negotiating question, which is after a rejection, after a pushback from the situation that you've got, to ask the other side, under what circumstances could you do this? It's ultimately what we want to know from the other side, right? What is the cost to me or to you of this exchange? How can we change things so that you will say yes? All right. And then you can judge whether or not you're prepared to.
So again, it's a hypothesis testing, isn't it? It's
Sure.
saying, why wouldn't you buy this from me now?
Yeah.
No. And
well, actually, it's more under what circumstances would you buy this from me?
Okay, so flip round.
Yeah.
So Richard, thanks very much for sharing.
My pleasure.
And you'll tell us all when your next book is out, which I think you've already got a title for.
Yes, I can't remember which one. The capitulation of value.
Capitulation of value. I thought it was marvelous.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks very much.